Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech, and today we're going to be talking about Temur Slivers. We did get a brand new card in Edge of Eternities that does really help out Slivers, and I wanted to talk about the new list today. I've talked about Slivers in the past. The last one I did was a 5-color deck that was, I want to say, relatively generic, but this deck is a little bit different than that list at its heart. We're only playing Temur. We're not playing 5-color Slivers, and we'll talk about why in just a moment here. But, as always, at the end of the video, let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about this deck? Is there a specific sliver that I should have put in this deck that I did not? Or do you have suggestions for upcoming videos? Just let me know in the comment section. Okay, so obviously everyone knows the card that we're talking about is Thrumming Hivepool. 6-mana artifact with affinity for Slivers. In Slivers you control have double strike and haste, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create 2 1/1 colorless Sliver creature tokens. So this card by itself is really strong and can kind of win the game all by itself. I mean, making 2 1/1 haste double strike Slivers every single upkeep is, or your upkeep, is pretty darn insane. But the objective of this deck is to get out a whole bunch of Slivers, play the Thrumming Hivepool for very, very little mana, and win the game. So let's go and take a look at the other Slivers that we're playing in this deck. We're playing a total of 30, although technically some are not Slivers right away, but it'll kind of make sense in a moment here. So as our 1-drops, we're playing 4 copies of Striking Sliver and 4 copies of Gale Rider Sliver. So one thing I have to mention, because if I don't mention it now, I know people ask in the comment section, for some forsaken reason, Gale Rider Sliver is not in Pioneer on Arena. I don't know why. So there's not really a good substitute, to be honest with you, in the 1-drop slot. You kind of just, if you're looking for another 1-drop, you're going to have to pick a non-Sliver, which off the top of my head, I don't know what the best option would be for Gale Rider Sliver. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that it's not in Pioneer on Arena, which is very sad. But if you're looking to play paper, you're good to go. It doesn't matter. So let's go and talk about the rest of the Slivers that we're playing. We are playing 2 copies of Mana Weft Sliver. Big fan of this just because it makes all of our Slivers tap for 1 mana of any color, which is good for some color fixing, but also can just lead to kind of like snowbally effects with mana, making a bunch of mana. We're also playing 4 copies of Diffusion Sliver, kind of like a pseudo ward kind of thing. You know, targets whenever a Sliver you control becomes a target of spell or brilliant opponent controls. Counter unless they pay 2, so definitely a good card. Then we're also playing 4 copies of Blur Sliver, gives our Slivers haste, which is fantastic. Being able to have 8 sources of haste is very good. And then rounding out our Slivers, we are playing 4 copies of Predatory Sliver, 4 copies of Metallic Mimic, and 4 copies of Adaptive Automaton. Obviously, these are our Sliver Lords. Mimic, obviously, we want to put in play before our other Slivers, so that way they enter with plus and plus 1 counters. But when it does come into play, it becomes a Sliver, so it gets to take advantage of all the different Sliver buffs that we have. And then Adaptive Automaton, one of the relatively new cards for Pioneer for Slivers. So it's just an additional Lord, nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I really do like the Lords that we're playing in this deck. And then the other cards we have to talk about, obviously Thrumming Hivepool and obviously Collected Company. Collected Company has always been pretty much the best card for all the low to the ground aggro decks, and that still continues to hold true. There's a few Slivers that are halfway decent that we're not playing. Like, we're not playing like Bone Slice Sliver or like Siphon Sliver, which are both very good cards in their own right. But I wanted to go with Temur just so that way we can have a more consistent mana base as well as like a more consistent sideboard. So that's why we're doing that, which, speaking of a land base, let's go and hop into that. We're playing 22 lands in our deck, and I really do like the lands that we chose. It might seem a little bit weird, but it's going to make sense here. So we're playing the full suite of just all the fast lands. Copperling Gorge, Botanical Sanctum, and Spirebluff Canal. There's pros and cons to running all these, but you know, since we're playing 3-color instead of like 5-color, we can get away with just playing like a bunch of good dual lands. So that's why we're playing the fast lands. We are also playing 2 Stomping Ground and 2 Breeding Pool. I was going to play 2 Steam Vents, but I really wanted some extra utility lands in there, but we also have some other lands that are going to help cast our Slivers. But we're also playing 1 Beseiju, just because Beseiju is awesome. And then we're also playing 2 copies of Sliver Hive and 2 copies of Cavernous Souls. I'm only playing 2 Sliver Hives just because I really wanted Cavernous Souls. I've been seeing a lot of control decks going around recently, and I didn't want to just play 4 of each of these because I want to make sure we can cast our sideboard cards, so I didn't want to play too many like colorless lands, at least in terms of, non-slivers. And with Sliver Hive, like, let's be honest, like, we're really not activating this very often. Like, sure, it can happen sometimes, but we're not really doing it very much. So that's why I'm only playing the 2 copies of Sliver Hive, and then we're playing 1 basic forest. And as our spicy basic land of the day, this is actually the forest from the premium deck series Sliver deck. It is foil only. I don't know how to describe the foiling. It's like a really old style foil. It's kind of like the Ripple foils that they make now, I would say is probably like the closest thing to it. But yeah, I always thought the foiling was really weird in this deck, and it's always unfortunate because like the foiling was not really that good in the premium deck series, so like a lot of the cards like really warped. I used to have a bunch of the lightning bolts back in the day, and those were like always Pringles, which was frustrating because it looked cool, but it was just a Pringle. But anyways, let's go and hop into the next thing here, which is the sideboard. So different compared to the last time I did slivers, because last time we were playing all these, like, we were playing 5-color slivers with like just a few green sources to play Collected Company, and then we had to play a bunch of like colorless sideboard cards just because we were playing all these rainbow lands for slivers. But since we have an actual mana base here, we can actually play some really good sideboard cards. So we're playing 3 copies of Pick Your Poison. It's such a great card right now in the metagame. Like, all the modes are fantastic right now. It's good against a number of different decks in the metagame. We're also playing 3 copies of Spell Pierce, just a really nice cheap counter spell. Our opponent's going to be bringing in all this cheap removal and board wipes and such, and Spell Pierce is able to stop those. We're playing 4 copies of Burst Lightning as some early game interaction. I'm playing this instead of Torch the Tower because we can kick this very easily, especially if we have a Mana Weft Sliver in play. So that's why I chose a Burst Lightning as opposed to Torch the Tower, because we could also just fling this at our opponent, which is pretty good. And then we're also playing 3 copies of Masked Vandal and 2 Sentinel of Lost Lore. I wanted cards that can destroy artifacts and enchantments, as well as exile graveyards that we could still put into play with Collected Company. I chose Sentinel over a card like Scavenging Ooze just because we are playing a lot of green sources, but not like a crazy amount. So I wanted something that could just come in and exile an opponent's graveyard. So that's why I chose a Sentinel of Lost Lore, which seems a little bit weird, but that's why we chose it. And yeah, Masked Vandal is just fantastic because it also counts as a sliver. So the next thing that we have to talk about is the tips and strategy for this deck. I've only got 2 tips or strategies, things I wanted to talk about, mostly just like how specific cards interact when they're in different zones kind of thing, which will make sense right now, but I've got 2 things I want to talk about. So the first one being, these are only slivers when in play, Metallic Mimic and Adaptive Automaton. So when we have Cavernous Souls, unless we name Shapeshifter or Construct, Cavernous Souls is not going to, protect these creatures. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're playing this. Like, if it's like, I can't think of anything else specifically, but like when they're in play, they count as slivers because it says as this creature enters, choose a creature type. So just keep that in mind. Also, like, not that this would probably happen in paper, but if you play this and then your opponent goes like, okay, in response to you choosing its creature type, I'm gonna kill it before it gets the buffs. No, it's like, as soon as it's in play, it is a sliver. And that's how like the wording works. It's the same thing with Pithing Needle. Like, you play Pithing Needle and then it resolves, and then you choose like what you're naming, like that you can't respond to it. Like, that's just how it works. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. The other thing I wanted to mention is Diffusion Slivers text. So what I've seen is a lot of new people will play slivers. So Diffusion Sliver says whenever a sliver creature you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter will say pay 2. So what people would do is they would an opponent would okay, I'm going to Doomblade your sliver, and then they'd go okay, Collected Company, put in Diffusion Sliver, boom, now you gotta pay 2 more. That's not how it works. So do keep that in mind. If your opponent uses a removal spell, it won't trigger if you put in a Diffusion Sliver after the spell's already on the stack. So keep that in mind with Diffusion Sliver. You have to have this in before, if that makes, it should make sense to people. But keep that in mind when you're looking to play Diffusion Sliver. It's a very good card. Basically our slivers getting Ward 2 is pretty darn good. The other thing to keep in mind is that these stack. If we have multiple Diffusion Slivers, that means if we have 2, then our opponents have to pay a total of 4 to be able to target our slivers, and that's why this card is absolutely incredible. So control decks and mid-range decks are going to have an extremely hard time dealing with Diffusion Sliver, and that's why we're playing the full 4 copies. So the last thing that we have to talk about today is the budget options, which is relatively straightforward. We can swap out Gale Rider Sliver. They go for, a decent amount each, just considering, but honestly, with the slivers, if you're looking to play this deck, I don't think you should cut the Gale Rider Slivers. Like, if you're looking to play Temur, like, this is the main reason I went Temur. The base deck, I would say, is red. That's where a lot of the good slivers are in. And then, obviously, green is good because you get Predatory Sliver and Collected Company. And then at that point, if you want to splash another color, I think blue is the best because of Gale Rider and Diffusion Sliver. If you play white, I guess you can get the Vigilance one and then the one that gives like +0/+1. But I really think blue is the best splash color. You can also swap out Cavernous Souls, Sliver Hive, as well as the Shocklands. Like, obviously with Cavern and Hive, you could put in like Secluded Courtyard, for instance. With the Shocklands, you could swap them out for really any of the other dual lands. You know, you could play like some slow lands. You could play, I probably wouldn't play check lands. You could play some Verges that are on color. You've got some different options there. The current list as it's constructed right now is $274 US, which is a little bit, I don't want to say on the expensive side, but it's a relatively pricey, mostly just because of like Cavernous Souls is expensive, Beseiju is expensive, Sliver Hive like has never really had a real reprint, so it's kind of expensive. So that's why the deck is the price the way it is, but I was able to get the budget list down to $58. But here's the thing to keep in mind with the budget list is I did switch it to red-green to be able to make the cost go down. You can still play a Temur budget version, like you could just take out your Shocklands for like some Pain lands, for instance, and you could call it a day, you know, cut your Presagio, whatever. But I decided to go cheaper just because with the budget version, you get a much easier mana base. It's literally just like Carplusian Forest, Copperline Gorge, Rootbound Crag, some basics, and a lair of the Hydra. It's really, really simple, but regardless, Slivers is such a fun deck. I played it in Modern a lot, and I really wish that they would add some Pioneer support. Like, obviously, a bunch of Slivers, they came into Modern Horizons, and then they did Commander Masters. This is the first real Sliver card that Pioneer Slivers has gotten in quite some time, and I really hope that, you know, coming soon, we start getting some more Changelings, or we start getting some more Sliver cards, so that way this deck can truly get the buffs that it really needs to be able to compete in the Pioneer format. But that's all I've got for you today. Thanks so much for watching. The deck lists are in the description below if you'd like to check them out for yourself. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Saronoki, Michael D, our premium channel member, The Common Cold, Jeremy P, and BG Stilts. If you're interested in being a channel member, it starts at $1 US a month, and you get access to the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane, thanks for watching this video, and hope to catch you in the next one.